I hear everything one way, even though they say I don't pay attention. Never stay from with regret, letting go that you pay flags. All the silence that keep me coming back. I'm the one that you hated. You know, the one you didn't want to believe. The one that you hated. Take a look at it now. I'm the one that you...
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Dad Talk Today. I want you to do a favor for me right now. If you're watching this show, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. I got a very important message for you today, and I got a good friend on the podcast to tell you about it, Mr. Edward Bartlett. Ed, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Eric. How's it going for you?
I am doing all right. You know, guys, if you didn't see the show that we did, I think it was sometime last year, exposing the domestic violence industry. I don't know how I didn't meet you sooner, Ed, but you have been doing years of research behind domestic violence, the myths behind VAWA, and I mean, hats off to you, sir. You've been doing a lot of important work.
Well, thank you for the compliment. It turns out the situation in other countries is actually worse than the United States. So that's why we are for the upcoming Human Rights Day, December the 10th, we want the theme to be men's rights are human rights.
Absolutely. Equality for one is equality for all. And we are far from equality. That is sure, for sure, guys. Do me a favor, guys. The Christmas season is upon us. There's going to be some of these fathers that are going to be going through situations like this, that are victims of domestic violence, might be going through family court, lost a spouse. We've heard from a little bit of everybody. At the link down at the bottom of the screen, Venmo, Dad Talk Today, no spaces, 100% of the proceeds, plus some of ours are going to be going to Adopt a Dad. We got some packages out yesterday to help some of our brothers that are going through these issues. So I just wanted to get that out. Again, like, share, and subscribe. Not going to be listening to the voicemails today because I want Ed to let everybody know about this Human Rights Day. It's coming up December 10th, correct?
That is correct, which is, of course, Saturday.
Yeah, tell everybody what's going on with that, Ed.
Yeah, well, first of all, let's go back to a few years ago. And so the United Nations, so the founding document of the United Nations is known as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it says very clearly in that all persons, and it says specifically members of both sexes, male and female, are entitled to equal rights before in the eyes of the law, which of course is the right thing to say. But here we are, 2022. Women's rights have received so much attention, an ongoing drumbeat of attention, that nobody's been talking about the gradual and steady erosion of men's rights and fathers' rights over the last 20, 30, 40 years. So that's what we're doing. We're here to restore the principle of gender equality and uphold that original Universal Declaration of Human Rights to say all persons are equal in the eyes of the law, or at least should be equal in the eyes of the law.
You know, and some people might not understand this. I think there is such a stigma and a narrative if a man is a victim of domestic violence that people don't have the sympathy as much. This was a subject that was very triggering to me, Ed. I was a victim of domestic violence. My person at the time was pregnant. You want to talk about feeling trapped, because the thoughts running through your head is, if I call the cops right now, what's going to happen? If I leave and she's pregnant, what's going to happen to me? Nobody's going to believe me. And that is the situation for a lot of these men who want to get some help, who want to report it. And this is a very big problem. I think it was the CDC. What is it? 3.5 million women versus 4.2 million men are victims of domestic violence. And that's only the men that are reporting it. Ed, I asked these guys just a week ago if they had been a victim, and they all said yes. And I said, did you report it? I'd say 90% of them said, no, I didn't report it because nobody was going to believe me. That's sad. That is sad.
Yeah. There's so many interesting and sad stories here. But the good news is the whole narrative. I mean, this is an issue that's being driven by the narrative, right? And I think you know what I mean
Yes.
by the narrative, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So
Mhm.
this narrative changed radically this a few months ago, following the trial of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Of course,
Yeah.
Amber Heard had written an editorial in the Washington Post, implying that Johnny Depp had been very abusive of her. So as a result, he lost his job, his career fell apart. So he filed a defamation lawsuit against Amber Heard. And so here we are, we have this trial going on in Virginia, and this trial was followed by millions of people all around the globe. And everybody could see, and I watched part of that trial myself. First of all, it was very clear that Amber Heard was not telling the truth. And I could give an example or two. But 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 at the end of the day, the jury ruled unanimously in favor of Johnny Depp. For example, one of the episodes that came out was at one time Amber Heard became enraged, threw a glass at at Johnny Depp, hit his finger and severed the end of his finger, requiring him to go to the emergency room. And there's actually a photograph of him lying in the hospital bed with a bloody bandage. So when we talk about domestic violence by women, we're not talking about a quote innocent slap. All right, we're talking about abusive situations that can escalate, and in some cases can be mortal, could be life threatening to the guy.
Oh, 100. I agree with you 100%. Talking about the narrative, but something else that really bothered me, Ed, watching that trial is, how much money and how crooked of an industry this is. Did you see the expert that was testifying for Amber? Doing his lips. I mean, this guy could barely function, and he's on here on one of the biggest trials of this nature as an expert. And I don't even know if the guy knew his ABCs. And that's the person that made the report against Johnny. And is that not really a reflection of what's going on behind the scenes with this?
Well, it really is, and it's sort of like we're in this alternate universe here, where facts don't matter, where the truth doesn't matter, where principles of gender equality don't matter. We're in this alternate universe. Call it totalitarian if you want to, but the whole domestic violence industry has become, I'm going to use the word totalitarian, has become just simply ignoring the truth about domestic violence. And let me actually give you a very recent example. I've been doing a lot of radio
Yeah.
interviews on this topic for literally years. And I did a radio interview just last week with a radio host in Connecticut. I won't say his name, but he said right there on the air, he said, you know what? I myself was punched by my former spouse. Not only that, he said, it was the hardest punch I ever received in my entire life. So, it's a different world when men are coming out and saying this, and basically saying, hey, I don't have to take the abuse any longer.
Anything a man can do, I can do better, unless we're talking about domestic violence. Then, oh, nobody's going to believe you. Come on, I can't hurt you. And unfortunately, that narrative is the one that usually wins. And it's sad. Imagine how many of these guys are just going on as victims. Ed, I want to get to something because I didn't know this when I started Dad Talk. I was just a dad going through it. And I said, we don't have any resources. I want to be media. We got to see each other at CPAC. And as you could see, we was there trying to raise the awareness any way that we could. But when I started this, I thought it was just an American problem. I was shocked to see how many people from Canada, Australia, Mexico, England. I mean, I could go on and on. Switzerland. I mean, and they show up in the show and they'll say, hey, from, wherever they're at. And I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And I got to have on a senator all the way from across the world, Senator Pauline Hanson over in Australia. And she came over to tell me how bad it was in Australia. She told me that over there, if you text your ex and say, can I see the kid? That right there is considered domestic violence and can carry a charge. What is going on overseas outside of the United States that people might not be aware of?
Yeah, the situation is dire, and I'm not exaggerating when I use the word dire. So many countries have expanded the definition of domestic, quote, violence to include what they call coercive control. And coercive control is basically uh, berating, belittling, demeaning your partner, calling your partner names. Okay, so it's certainly not a good thing to be, be calling your partner, these names. But when you get down to it, coercive control is pretty much the same as nagging, right?
Yeah.
So if you are accused of nagging, well, first of all, I want to say Centers for Disease Control reveals that coercive control is done far more often by females than by males. So that fact is just, we know that is a fact. So, but whether you're male or female and you're accused of coercive control, how do you prove that no, it's a false allegation? Unless you have a videotape, you can't do it. So in the example you just shared, Eric, of the guy sending a text message, that's that's a subcategory of coercive control called technological abuse. Okay, so so this is like a many headed hydra monster that's spreading out in many directions, going into civil law, going into criminal law. It really is a threat.
Oh, 100%. We just had the story that broke a couple of days ago. Father accused of, an allegation. He was a principal, been there 22 years, even won Employee of the Year. And the wife later, after she was drunk, came back later and said, "Oh, I want to dismiss the charges. It wasn't true." But he knew what was going to happen. He was put on like administrative leave, and he jumped to his death at Disneyland and wrote the Facebook post. Now, we don't know everything that happened there, but for people that aren't aware of this issue, it's so easy to say, "Oh, there was a guilty guy. He just went and killed himself." No, they know once this allegation is made, for many people that know this system, whether you can prove your innocence or not, that's going to follow you for the rest of your life. And it's not just, losing your kids or whatever. You can lose anything you've ever worked for off a simple allegation. I was talking to a politician yesterday. The guy was winning. I mean, by a long shot. And then there was a domestic violence allegation made like 3 weeks before the election. And I'm going to tell you, it won. If you look him up now, every page that you go to is going to be this allegation. Rolling Stone, everybody put it out there. What they're not going to tell you is the next week he went to court. They found that it was false and he was exonerated of all charges. There was no retraction articles. That was enough to damage his career. And we're seeing it in politics. We're seeing it in relationships. And the fact that we don't have more consequences for these actions and more education, especially as it pertains to men, I think we're getting to a really deadly spot with this, Ed. We've been there for a long time, but it seems like it's getting worse.
Well, I think so, Eric. Actually, a few years ago, we did a national survey, opinion poll in the United States. We polled a representative sample of American adults, and we found that overall, 11% of American men reported they had been falsely accused of domestic violence, sexual assault, or child abuse. 11% of men, but also this is a problem that affects women, but to a lesser extent. 6% of women said they had been falsely accused of domestic violence, sexual assault, or child abuse. So what are the consequences? Well, just as you said, Eric, except for the very extreme, egregious cases, the consequence is the allegation stands as stated. There's no refuting of the allegation. The media doesn't cover that, and the person's reputation is stained for essentially forever.
You know, as much as you explain this, sometimes there will be people that might not understand the connections that we're making here. What has this got to do with dads? What has this got to do with fatherlessness? Ed, how does those false allegations and what we're seeing with these domestic violence industries, how does that play into fatherlessness?
It has everything to do with fatherlessness because um, domestic violence to a partner is assumed to be related to child abuse or violence directed to the children. So if the guy who's been accused of some sort of domestic abuse, it might be through a restraining order, okay? So the restraining order, accuses the guy of some kind of partner abuse, and it's called the silver bullet because the woman then, like a few days later, files the the divorce papers asking for full custody of the kids. And so the judge looks at, oh, well, there's a restraining order already in place against the guy. And so, no, he could be a child abuser. So no, we're not going to give him, we're not going to give him shared parenting 50%. And that creates a cascade effect that continues through the
Absolutely.
entire divorce hearing process, and then beyond that. So yeah, and actually, we're actually putting out a press release um, on Thursday about Human Rights Day and men's rights or human rights, and we highlight the fact that these abuses in the domestic violence arena have a direct effect on fathers and fatherlessness.
Yes, sir. Guys, there are so many different websites. I'm definitely going to plug that in at the end, but I want you to know when we do that, get in there, get this research, post it everywhere you can. I was that guy, Ed, that thought nobody's talking about this. We don't have any research. And that's how I found you. I had to search hard, but I found it. And I was like, who are these people? I was like, they have done an amazing job. And I wanted to use it in I Stand With John, indadv.org right there. If you want to learn about VAWA and all these, how it all plays together. Look, guys, I know sometimes we can get lost in the weeds with it. A lot of these guys, Ed, say, hey, I'm just a father that wants to be a dad. Now I'm going through the system. That's where I'm at. You got to educate yourself. You didn't end up in the spot that you're in right now for no reason. Do you think, I mean, there's many cogs to this wheel, but it seems like no matter what we're talking about, whether it's domestic violence, CPS, family court, it seems like the one thing it all boils down to is money. Is that the case when we're talking about domestic violence?
That's obviously a big part of it, but I think if I were to identify what is the core issue here driving all of this, I would say it's ideology. And to be more specific, I would say it's Marxist ideology. Remember that Karl Marx, he's the German economist who came up with Marxist ideology. He decreed years ago that the family was oppressive to women. Let me say that again. Karl Marx decreed that the nuclear family was oppressive to women. All right. Now, he didn't give any evidence or proof, didn't cite any studies. All the studies show that people who are married, they live longer, they're happier, they have better incomes, their children do much better, on and on and on. So from the science perspective, it's just unequivocal truth that families are the key unit of society. All right, but ideology is not based on science; it's based on ideology, right? So
Right.
so it's no secret that feminism is based on Marxist ideology. So what did the feminists do in order to, quote, rid themselves of the family oppression of the family unit? What they did is they went after the weak link, and that weak link, of course, is the father, because the father
Yep.
typically has a weaker biological connection to the kids. So going after the father. So that's why domestic violence ideology is based on, we have to topple the patriarchy in order to rid ourselves of patriarchal power and control. And I'm really quoting directly from their own writings. I'm not exaggerating the words that they use to describe, how do they, what is their worldview of domestic violence?
Right. Ed, let me ask you a question. How long have you been doing research in this field?
Almost more years than I care to admit, but if you pin me down, I would say it's been since 2013 that I've been working on this issue and trying to, improve and change the federal policies in the U.S. And now more recently, we're going international with our activities. So we've established an international group. It's called the Domestic Abuse and Violence International Alliance, which goes by the shorter name DAVIA, DAVIA. So we actually have about 65 groups all around the world.
Awesome.
Europe, South America, Latin, Africa, Asia, and so forth, who are part of this Domestic Abuse and Violence International Alliance effort, because it's amazing how similar the stories that you're sharing right now, Eric. I had a conversation earlier today, this morning, with a fellow from Scotland. He told me exactly the same thing is going on in Scotland. So the United States is not unique. This is a global problem and a global threat that we're facing.
And that's what I was wanting to ask you. In that time, since you've been in this space doing that, have you seen it get any better, or do you see it getting worse?
I have to say it's gotten worse because the ideology has become more powerful. The definitions of domestic violence have grown more expansive to include the coercive control concept. Standards of proof seem to be weaker. Yeah, we are in a dire situation. I don't think we can, sweet talk our way out of this. This is a dire situation. It's a threat to the basic fundamental civil rights and human rights to all persons. And I'll say not just to men, because it turns out that women in same-sex lesbian relationships have domestic violence rates that are sky high. They are far higher than men in homosexual relationships or heterosexual relationships. But this narrative, again, ignores women in same-sex relationships. So this narrative is a threat to everybody, men, women, and children.
Absolutely. Ed, for the people that's listening in the community, I hear it a lot. We can't just talk about it. You guys need to get solutions. There's many groups trying to get solutions, but we've got to get the awareness out about it. And we got to get awareness out about groups like yours. Everybody can contribute. I'm curious, what are some of the things that you think that are needed in order to fight this the way we need to fight it?
The first step, Eric, is that we have to break the narrative. The narrative is so powerful that advocates simply invoke a few words, and those words are violence against women, and those 3 or 4 words triggers a whole panoply of associations, which ultimately result in the stereotyping and vilification of men. So we have to start by challenging and debunking that narrative. And once we do that, then we can start to look at the policies like mandatory arrest, like restraining orders given without any evidence or proof other than a person saying, "I'm fearful." The list is pretty long, but we have to challenge and change the narrative.
And I agree. We've been out there in the political arena. I believe that's needed, but I just realized, even when I'm at these conferences or other places, people will say, "What is it that you talk about on Dad Talk?" I usually talk about the challenges men face in divorce and the bias, with domestic violence and stuff. The second they hear me say Dad, the nose goes up in the air. There's a bunch of those guys that don't need to be around their kids. And that hurts my heart so bad. Why is that the first thing that people say when I mention dads? You don't hear that when you mention mothers. You don't hear that when you mention women. But anytime you mention dad to somebody on the outside, there's a bunch of deadbeat dads that don't need their kids or that just abandon them. It's a very strong narrative. It's on TV. It's everywhere. And I want to do more shows like this. I'd love to talk to that gentleman that you have from Scotland so we can show what's going on over there. Australia. I'm meeting with an Australian group today. I was shocked to see there's tons of them, guys. We've got to expose it. we've got to expose it because the media is not going to do it for us. I feel like we got to grow our own media. We got to have these conversations. With this Human Rights Day coming up, what is it everybody can do to help, and tell them where they can go and find out this research, Ed?
Well, I think the first step, Eric, was to simply come to our website. You already gave the URL, end2dv.org, and the the two is TO, end2dv.org. Come to our website because it's filled with information and facts and based on good science. And so you'll see the science, and I'll just give an example. So you've probably heard the claim that during the COVID lockdown, that domestic violence rates skyrocketed or surged. Well, that's just a bunch of crock. Okay, we've actually looked at that. We've looked at the FBI numbers. We looked at 911 calls. We've looked at the research is so extensive, it's really amazing. There's just simply no evidence to support that claim that domestic violence increased under the COVID lockdown. And in some cases, actually, there's documentation of a decrease in domestic violence. So I'm just giving just one example of the narrative that's flat out wrong. So visit our website, learn about the facts, what's really going on. And then contact your lawmakers, whether it's state lawmakers, federal lawmakers, and speak out. But again, I think the most important message is, Eric, to guys, you don't have to take the abuse any longer. If you're being psychologically abused, speak out. Tell your partner or your spouse, hey, honey, that was abuse. That comment was abusive and inappropriate. I'd like you to stop it.
I agree, Ed, but I'm like going back to that. You talk about coercive control and stuff. I mean, we heard it from Amber. Oh, did I hurt you? I didn't hit you. I punched you, or and she's just like, are you a man? You're a boy. They just start getting worse. And people think that we're bashing all women when we talk about that. No, but there is a certain type of person that a lot of these same tricks are played, guys. I'm sorry. And they will just talk down at them, abuse you, then taunt you about it, and then dare you to call the cops. Go ahead, tell the world, Johnny, I hit you. Nobody's going to believe you. You are a man. And the sad thing was, had he not had that recording, Ed, that probably would have been gospel coming out of Amber's mouth. What did these guys do? I was that guy. What do I do? If I call, I'm going to jail. This is what we're talking about, guys. And for anybody that's listening that hasn't been through that, if you want to know what that feels like, it's literal hell on earth. No man should put his hands on a woman. No woman should put her hands on a man. Nobody should be putting their hands on anybody, especially children. Domestic violence is wrong when it happens to everybody. And that should be a simple message. It's that magic word, equality. So many people say it, but they don't seem to practice it, Ed.
Right. So I think if I were to sum this up, Eric, I'd say, and this is speaking to guys in particular, if it's like a one-time psychological abuse, simply speak out and say, honey, I'd like you to stop that. That was abusive. Stop doing that. If it continues or escalates, consider getting counseling, getting professional help to resolve the issue. Now, if it becomes repeatedly severe, increasingly severe, or repeatedly done, then the guy faces a dilemma. And I think the dilemma is call the police or leave the relationship. And that's a very tough call because sometimes the police will arrest the victim, the guy, not the female perpetrator. So sometimes, you do have to leave the relationship, at least temporarily. So this is a tough issue. It's a complicated issue. But again, the narrative is so totally bankrupt that it has to be ended.
Absolutely. I know we talked about end2dv.org, guys. Make sure to go and check that out. You've got a few more places that they can check out too, don't you, Ed?
Well, we have a partner organization called SAVE, S-A-V-E. The website is saveservices.org. And SAVE focuses on campus due process, uh, college students who are accused of sexual misconduct. And it turns out, if you dig deeply, the issues are very similar to what we're discussing right now, because we're talking about a narrative, we're talking about a lack of due process. So yeah, that's our partner organization.
Are you guys a 501c3 into DV?
We are 501c3
.org?
nonprofit. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Guys, I'm going to ask for them. Anybody that can contribute. It takes a lot to get this research out. We're talking about a worldwide reach out there. Please get out there, get this research. When this comes out on Thursday, when he releases it, make sure that we spread it as far and wide as we can. These are some of the guys fighting the fight behind there, and I appreciate all of your hard work and everybody that's on your team. I know you got a team over there. It can be thankless work sometimes, but I'm glad to know we got people like you fighting that fight, Ed, and I appreciate you coming on today.
My pleasure, Eric. Be in touch.
All right, guys.